Welcome back. You're watching The Agenda, and thank you so much for staying with us. Today is the 1st of August, and South Africa is celebrating National Women's Month. Remember that question we're asking you: have South African women raised their voice sufficiently in the fight against COVID-19? Send us your comments at @theagenda_SABC. Now, in relation to that, the 1,000 Women One Voice movement is marking Women's Month by amplifying their voice in the fight against gender-based violence by providing trauma support training via the Hear Me Too initiative. We're joined now via Zoom by the trustee, Tina Thiart, Suzanne Ackerman, director at Pick n Pay, and Carol Bouwer, who's a businesswoman and humanitarian, also ambassador of the initiative. Ladies, thank you so much for making the time today. A happy Women's Month to all of you, and let me thank you again for making the time. Tina, let me start with you. Tell us about the work of 1,000 Women One Voice and how many women you've reached so far.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. The 1,000 Women Trust was founded a very long time ago, 2003. And we have worked with numerous community-based organizations in South Africa. Over 900 have received funding from us. And we fund the basic support that they give to women in communities who are survivors of gender-based violence, but also those who are trying to find their own solutions to the problems in their communities. Last year, we donated over R1 million, all funding from individuals. And if I really have to say to you how many people have supported us and we've worked with, it is enormous. 22 million women and men supported us last year, 22 million in South Africa.
Suzanne, let's bring you in the conversation. Just remind us how this program was started. 23 million down the line in terms of financial support. And why has it been important to sustain this initiative?
Thank you, Desiree. It's, I think the crisis and the situation in South Africa alone speaks for itself as to why it's important to sustain, and absolutely why Pick n Pay is so behind Tina and 1,000 Women and the initiative, and want to thank Carol for joining us. The more voices we have to highlight this pandemic, and even the president himself a couple of weeks ago spoke about the pandemic of gender-based violence. And we all say enough is enough, but what are we actually doing about it? What are the consequences? There are endless thousands and thousands of crimes being committed daily, weekly against the women of this nation. And we need to stand together. And I think, Desiree, it's absolutely vital that more voices are heard. So 23 million is a drop in the ocean, in my opinion. We need action. We seriously need to stop this wave of violence against women and children in this country.
I tell you, it's not a drop in the ocean at a time like this, when we have stories about money that has been set aside for specific work that ends up going to the wrong places. How do you ensure from your side that the money reaches the intended beneficiaries?
Tina is very hands-on, and the organization is extremely an on-the-ground type of movement that works with women who are on the ground in small shelters, in homes. Many of them have not been able to be registered. Tina helps them through the registration process, and the women are on the ground, really, and we ensure that the money goes directly to those in need. And I'm sure Tina can back that up.
Carol Bouwer, let's bring you in here. Amongst the many roles you play, including your role in the UNICEF Influential Women's Circle, you're also an ambassador for the 1,000 Women One Voice initiative. How does this tie in to all the other charity work or humanitarian work that you do?
I think as a South African woman, Desiree, it would be remiss to just sit back and be a spectator when the problems that really face our community are as enormous as what we're dealing with. So for me, it is not even about what organization one supports. The work that I do with UNICEF, the work that I do with the Influential Women's Circle, together with this, it all ties in, and it's part of humanity. It's part of who I am as a person. I believe that being on the ground and working with organizations that are touching and feeling the reality of women on a daily basis, for me, of the work that I do on a global scale. Of course, I love being with UNICEF. It allows me to feel that I'm making an impact when it comes to children. But I want to know the names of the people in whose lives I'm making an impact. I want to be able to walk the path with them and say that we will arrive at a place of healing in tandem, working with each other, finding solutions together. So I really wanted to be a part of a South African organization, and it needed to be one that I knew had integrity. It needed to be one that I knew was really making a difference in people's lives. And I think that when Suzanne suggested to 1,000 women that they bring me on board, she was really preaching to the converted, because they had seen the work but for me, if she hadn't asked, I was ready to ask her as well.
Tina, as the person in charge of the operations, that question I was asking Suzanne earlier about, how do you ensure that this big budget that you have actually reaches the intended beneficiaries? What processes have you got in place to ensure that this happens?
So first of all, we've got a very good relationship with most of the community-based organization leaders because we work with women-led organizations, and we also help them to make sure that they are compliant. Furthermore, they participated regularly in our events. At the moment, we've got 264 of them on a learning platform on WhatsApp. They host small events, and they send us the research from their events. So we really see where the money goes to, and we really see the big difference that small pockets of money do to these women. At the moment, 45 soup kitchens feed over 20,000 people a day just in the Cape Town community that we are working with. And these are actually women who provide support for gender-based violence survivors, but they had to step up. They're cooking food, and every day they are still providing support around gender-based violence, every single day. And they collect information about COVID, they collect information about gender-based violence, and they educate their communities. And this is the kind of organizations that we work with. They fall under the funding radar of most funders. And so we know them, they phone us. I've got thousands of them on WhatsApp.
Desiree, if I may interrupt, I think it's a very important point that Tina raises, because when you look at the conversation that you're having about funds going missing and how government is using the money, the story of COVID-19 that is going to be compelling is going to be about how communities came together and began to build sustainable infrastructure that allows them to make an impact in each other's lives. And it's going to be about how we've carried each other through this process, how we've carried each other through the pandemic. Suzanne and I make bread on a daily basis. We haven't met necessarily the people for whom we're making this bread, but we do know that they are us and we are them. And I think that what Tina has done is illustrate that you do not need to wait for government to provide the solutions needed. We can hold government accountable, but while we're doing that, we need to get the work of getting our people fed, clothed, and all other basic human rights that they have. We need to be part of that process.
Suzanne, of course, it's important to respond to the immediate needs, such as the provision of food and shelter and the fight against gender-based violence. Is there any endeavor by 1,000 Women, One Voices to go into the deeper issues of equality and parity and making sure that women are given their place at the table?
Yes, we are launching now our legal program with women. Next week, we are having a day discussing women and employment. We are addressing issues around housing. As you know, housing and the right to housing is big in South Africa. So it is actually all about women's rights, how women can step up, and then what we as community can do to support women so that they are economic empowered and that they are able to work with their community and the children to have a better life for everybody in South Africa. And that's really what we are really fighting very hard. Women must know their rights. Women must have access to knowledge. They must have access to skills, and they must have resources. We need to own the river.
Suzanne, the corporate organization that you were saying?
Sorry, I was just going to put into context the 1,000 Women, One Voice and the function that usually takes place. And obviously because of COVID, we're not able to hold it. So usually it's a phenomenal event that usually happens with 1,000 women in one place for an event, a lunch, and women from all sectors of society and every community come together and hear stories of survival, hear stories of hope, and get together and support. And that's been going on for 15 years, I think, maybe even more. And my mother, Wendy Ackerman, is the patron of that organization. And this year, obviously, do that. So we decided to get together and host a series of webinars throughout the month of August to invite all those people who would have come to an event and to reach it out even further to a wider database, to our customer database, and get more people involved to share the stories and to actually start speaking about the issues together in their homes.
I wanted to say that the corporate that you represent, Suzanne, is a very well-entrenched South African company that employs a very big percentage of women. What are you doing in terms of empowering women in that space?
This is a constant focus of mine as I am transformation director, and I have a voice. As many of you know, Carol knows, I have a voice. I'm not afraid to use it. But I think we have a long way to go, Desiree, in terms of empowerment of women in our communities. And what I would like to share, and what I try and share with my colleagues right across the company, and there are over 80,000 employees in the retail chain, Pick and Pay, and it's trying to encourage women to have a voice, to teach their children, their sons, exactly the same way as they teach their daughters, to have no distinction between the two, to not show favoritism. And I do believe that is the one message we can try and get through to the next generation of parents. Start teaching your children as equal. Equality starts in the home. It doesn't start in the workplace. It doesn't start at schools. It starts right there in the crib and in the cot. Wherever you are, women and babies and male and female babies need to be treated as equal and understand the respect for one another.
Of course, we're talking about historical issues that have been challenges for women, but the one current issue has been COVID-19, and we're asking our viewers today, have women really been vocal? Have they used their voice in all the aspects of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic? Carol, what are your thoughts about the role of women in the fight against COVID-19?
So I was part of a conversation that the African Union, together with the United Nations Women, hosted around the impact of COVID-19 on women, but also how their voices are being marginalized in the dissemination of not just information, but also supplies around this. And I think the biggest outtake for me is women have not actually been waiting around for anybody to give them an opportunity to be heard, to be empowered. Women understand that they arrive empowered. They arrive with the voice that they require. The conditions may not necessarily be conducive to those voices being heard, but we are going to systematically work together as women to begin to dismantle these institutions that make it difficult for us to be heard. But at no point are we asking for permission to be heard. At no point as women are we asking for somebody to give us space. We are building the spaces. I mean, for me, the fact that 1,000 Women has been going for as many years as it has. I think it is over 15 years. It started in 2003. So it's 17 years that we're talking about. And the issues that were part of the affirmative years continue to plague society today. All it says is that we need to begin to scale not just our voices, but also bringing our girl children and our boy children into these conversations. We can't be speaking, to ourselves. We need to be speaking to those we wish to bring along. The other thing that I think is a big conversation we need to have is, what are the pillars of building an equitable society that we're leaving out of this conversation? We talk about the demand for safety for women in their homes, the demand for access to healthcare, etc. But we're not talking about giving access to their right to self-actualization. If you are keeping those boardrooms locked, we need to begin as women to think about how we create economic emancipation for ourselves, so that our girl children are not dating married older men in order to access opportunities that they don't feel are attainable for them as girl children. So let's begin to think about how health, the economy, and all of that is part of the broader gender-based violence conversation, because I think that we are violating women perpetually by not giving them access to what they should have access to.
Ladies, unfortunately, a conversation like this has time constraints, but Suzanne, let's just end off with you in terms of your activations for the month. What's going to be happening in terms of the 1,000 Women, One Voice activations for the Women's Month calendar?
Well, thank you so much for giving us this voice, actually. So for the every Wednesday, we are doing Wednesday Women webinars, and the access to them will be on the 1,000 Women One Voice website, as well as the Pick and Pay website. And we will be sending out links to many of our smart shopper base. And we hope as many people as possible will join. It will be free to join, with an opportunity to provide a little bit of funding, whatever people can afford, towards the organization. And again, we are asking for a very small donation of 21 Rand, 50 Rand, 100 Rand, whatever people can, that will go towards helping feed and facilitate and empower thousands of women around the country. But just the last thing I'd like to say is I just really feel we need to take ownership of the consequences and put some means in place to make the people who commit the consequences.
Absolutely.
Ladies, thank you very much for speaking to us today. Suzanne Ackerman Berman is the director at Pick and Pay, and Tina is the coordinator at 1,000 Women, One Voice, and Carol Bouwer is a businesswoman and humanitarian, all talking to us about the work of 1,000 Women, One Voice. Thank you so much for helping us start off Women's Month, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Cha-cha. All right, let's take a break.